This is Golden Years, a roadmap to navigate retirement with Mark Cordner, the podcast.
Mark, welcome. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Things are going good. We've got a lot of people interested in talking to us, and that's always fun, when people are engaging. These 6-hour classes are really wonderful because you get a extra tier of interest, as it were. When people commit to that much time, they're serious.
Yeah.
So life's good. I'm real happy.
I mean, I think a lot of people are being more proactive about their retirement. We're seeing that more and more here in 2025. A lot of folks kind of getting all their ducks in a row, really taking hold of their retirement more so than just looking at a statement, throwing it in a drawer and going, well, I guess I'm going to be all right. I mean, they really are taking the bull by the horns and going, let me see exactly how this is working for me. Let me make sure that I understand how my plan's going to work for me. And speaking of that, I know tax is obviously a huge conversation throughout the year, honestly. And RMDs is another one you need to be focused on here. RMDs, they must be taken from your retirement accounts once you turn the golden age of 73. This is, of course, so Uncle Sam, bless his heart, he gets his share of taxes. But is there some leeway on this when you must comply in that 73rd year for your first RMD? Well, here's Morningstar's Christine Benz, and she weighs in.
So there's what's called a required beginning date. And this is actually April 1st of the year after the year in which you turn 73. So an example, say I turned 73 in 2024, I would have until April 1st of 2025 to take that first RMD. The tricky part about it is that April 1st RMD would be for 2024. I'd have to take another one by year end 2025 to account for my 2025 RMDs.
All right. So if you're like a lot of my listeners out here, you're just like me going, wait a minute, what? There's dates and there's ages and there's all these rules. Mark, in English, what is this about? What do I need to do?
First off, there's too many acronyms. So what we're talking about are required minimum distributions. And basically, the deal is the government allows us to postpone taxation on the earnings when we put money into traditional individual retirement accounts, 401ks, 403bs, these kind of group or employer-sponsored plans. And so for the last 50 years, people have really been focusing on getting their tax deduction now. In other words, not recognizing those earnings now, postponing the recognition of those earnings until later when they actually pull the money out of their retirement accounts. But the kicker is some people find that they don't need that money when they get to retirement. They may have sufficient other assets. They may have pensions. And so they just are not in a rush to take the money out, and the government's tired of waiting. So it used to be that at age 70 and a half, people had to start taking a minimum amount out each year for the rest of their life. And so you can take as much as you want. You can take any maximum up to the account value that you want, but you can't take less than the minimum that this government formula dictates. And so the obligation is on each American who has retirement plans to aggregate or to combine all of their different account values as of December 31st of any given year, and then run it through this simple formula. Basically, at age 73, it's just under 4% of your total account values that have to come out that year. Each subsequent year up until age 100, you have to take incrementally more until that percentage withdrawal increases to 16%. Now, this woman that you've cited with Morningstar is absolutely correct. In that first year, they give you a little leeway. So sometimes people miss this. In fact, this is the number one mistake that Americans make with their IRAs is they forget to take the required minimum distributions or RMDs. And the penalty in the past has been 50% of the amount you should have taken out plus the tax. Now, fortunately, they recently reduced that penalty to 25%, but it's still a stinker. So 25% plus your tax means you could end up giving up half of what you were required to take out to Uncle Sam. So she's correct. They give you some leeway. You can push off that first year, but if you do, you're going to have to take 2 transactions the next year. I'm not a big fan of, telling people about this because sometimes people just drag their feet. I think of it more as a safety hatch, as it were. So if you do miss it, then you've got that backup that first year. But we go out of our way to help clients be aware of this. We start sending emails out to our clients in October and November, just reminded them, basically just waving our hands and saying, hey, if you haven't taken your minimum distribution out yet, let's do that. For most of our clients, we set it up on an automated schedule. And so many of them particularly if they don't need the money for day-to-day living expenses. Rather than take the distribution every month over the course of a given year, they'll instead just take a one-time-a-year distribution in December and think of it as Christmas money. So you can really design things however you want, but you can automate it. Here's one other important tip, and that is that let's say you have, just to use easy numbers, 10 different accounts with $100,000 in each. There's $1 million in your IRAs. You can actually do your distribution from any of those 10 accounts as long as it's sufficient to cover all 10 of those IRAs. And so the obligation is on each IRA owner to do the math. So let's say you have your money with Fidelity or Schwab. They may send you a courtesy notice that tells you how much you're supposed to take out of the account that you have with them, but they don't know about money that you may have with other institutions. And so the obligation really is on each individual retirement account owner, each IRA owner, to do the math. And we, of course, remind them and encourage them to do this because no one wants to pay the penalties. In short, it's Uncle Sam just tired of waiting for their piece of the action. And we got to acknowledge that IRA, a portion of it, has always belonged to Uncle Sam. So let's just pay him off and get him out of our life.
No, I think we all agree with that. Pay them off, get them out of the way. But, when it comes to this magic age of 73, and by the way, correct me if I'm wrong, with RMDs, this magic number has changed several times. I mean, gosh, years ago it was like 70 and a half, then it was 71. Yep. Now we've made our way to 73. So this is also something that is forever changing. And I think that's something important to keep in mind is, you don't necessarily listening. You don't have to keep your finger on the pulse of these things. This is where Mark comes in. He's on top of all the latest and greatest changes they want to make within our tax code and when and how you have to do things. But for those that are maybe 71, 72, about to turn 73, do we start looking at this the year we turn 73, 2 years before we turn 73? When's the best time?
I think the earlier we talk about it, the better. I mean, it's an early conversation from the very first discussions that I have with clients of the day is going to come when you're going to have to start taking this money out. Now, Congress is actually looking at extending that date from 73 to 75. So you're absolutely right. Yeah. It is a moving target. But as IRA account owners, we need to plan ahead. And one of the wonderful things about the Roth conversion opportunity is people who may have spent, the last 30, 40, 50 years accumulating money in a pre-tax or tax-deferred manner can choose to pay the tax now and convert those IRA savings into Roth IRA status. Roth, R-O-T-H, named after Senator Roth. And the Roth can grow absolutely income tax-free and distribute money income tax-free. But most importantly, it does not have the required minimum distribution obligation on the account owner themselves. So if you choose to convert your money from pre-tax to post-tax, as it were, traditional IRA to Roth IRA, then you also free yourself up from this obligation to live under required minimum distributions. So this is a big deal for a lot of people who may not need that money. They don't want to be under the government's thumb to do these calculations every year and to get spanked if they miss a deadline. And so by converting this money to a tax-free position, not only do they get that money legally off the radar for themselves and their beneficiaries, but they relieve themselves of that headache doing that calculation every year. So people have lots of options, and it's something we talk about from the very first conversations we have with folks.
Interest rates have started to fall, but just very, very slowly. Vanguard is telling its clients to get out of cash in favor of bonds. And I want to know, Mark, is this a conversation that you're having with your clients?
Oh, absolutely. We're having it. We find, certainly bonds should be part of a portfolio. We do structured investments, so it's definitely part of the portfolio. But there was an interesting study done by Roger Ibbotson. He's a famous professor from Yale, and they did a study that talked about how if you use fixed indexed annuities, you can actually get better performance than you can out of the bond portion of your portfolio. And so when we have this conversation about safety, we're actually looking at alternative investments, not just bonds, but we're also looking at the role that a fixed index annuity might play, because you can eliminate the risk associated with bonds when we deal with fixed index annuities, and we can typically get a better rate of return. So yes, bonds should be part of the picture. Other products should also be considered in the picture. And people ought to be having this conversation as we expect interest rates to go down.
One of the most confusing parts about getting ready for retirement is all the mixed messages that we hear in the media. For example, there was a writer for Business Insider posted a story, and he said 2025 would see a third year in a row of 20% growth. Sounds great. That same writer in the same publication on the same day posted another story warning investors to brace yourself for a correction this year, right? So, I mean, it eventually becomes kind of a CYA situation. He's trying to just, cover whichever basis or whichever comes next year. But at the end of the day, how do you help your clients find that balance between protection and growth?
Well, we've got to consider both, but I think one of the best things we can do is turn off the financial media. We have to recognize that the financial media is sponsored by advertisers, and so their messaging often has more to do with what the advertisers want than what may be in the best interest of an individual investor. And we also have to recognize that with these, particularly these media guru types, these financial guru types, they're given a one-size-fits-all bit of advice, and that's a real problem, quite honestly, because many people take it as gospel. I've had a number of people come in who say, well, such and such guy on the radio told me that I can always get 10% every year on the market. It'll never be less than that. At least that's the way the client is interpreted. And that gets a little dangerous because the market doesn't behave that way. So one of the best things we can do is turn off the financial media. I call it a form of pornography, and that's not to offend, because we know that pornography is designed to excite us and get us to do things that are self-destructive and self-harming. And that's basically what these media types do, is they get people all excited. And so in the middle of the night in their pajamas, they're jumping on the computer and they're trading. And what that does is simply generate fees for Wall Street, who is the primary advertiser for so many of these media messages that go out there. So to have someone flip, I mean, we see this with Jim Cramer and others, well, within a 24-hour period, they're giving the conflicting advice. And so we just have to be really careful with that and recognize, again, that a one-size-fits-all doesn't fit each of us individually. So we say, come in for a customized review. Let's have a conversation about you, about your priorities, about your concerns. If you have particular fears about certain aspects of the market or certain kinds of financial products, let's look at it. And we're often giving out books. There's 10 different books that I share with people because we want them to be educated before they make commitments, about their own future. And at the end of the day, I'm kind of product agnostic in the sense that we only introduce tools that fit a need. So if someone needs to build a house and cut a piece of lumber, then we talk about saws. We don't talk about hammers, for example. When people start pushing a particular product, that there's probably a commission involved. And if it seems like there's a bias, you just got to ask questions. And so we invite clients to test us, ask those questions, see why we're recommending the things that we do, because it cannot be a one-size-fit-all situation. So first thing you do is turn off the financial media. Second thing, come visit with a professional advisor who's spent decades, hopefully, learning how to help you.
Are you feeling your age, Mark? Every once in a while, do you go to get up or get off the couch and you go, oh my God, I didn't know that hurt, but now it does.
Yeah, it's like I rolled out of the wrong side of the bed. Why is this hurting me? Yeah,
100%.
You don't know what triggered it. So that seems to be the joy of growing older. Our bodies start to decline. We become more frail, and we have to start thinking differently.
You do. You got to start thinking differently. And I think that happens as your body changes, your brain changes a little bit. And I say that because I think comedian Brad Upton, he's feeling like me and you. You feel the aches and pains, but also you start feeling things change a little bit.
I don't know about you people. Life for me now is just a series of events reminding me I'm getting older. Anybody else? That's all my life is now. I was at the mall the other day in the food court. Several very attractive women walked past me. I realized I was staring at their food.
I love that. I was just looking at their food. Man, that food looks good. And, sometimes you can look at food or dessert. You ever been to a restaurant where they have a dessert bar and you start looking and you go, man, I'm going to eat, 5 pieces.
Yeah, you're fixated
cake.
On that.
Yeah, you're fixated. It looks the best thing you've ever seen. And then you might order it and you go, this is terrible. What was I even thinking? Well, sometimes looks can be deceiving, right? It might look great. It might seem great, but when you get to it, not so great. And it got me thinking about folks that come in and meet with you, Mark, and maybe they come from putting their own plan together, or maybe somebody else somewhere along the line tried to help them and they had this idea that they thought was amazing. And then they sat down with you and you actually said, actually, guys, this isn't what you thought it was. It was that dessert that looks so tasty and so good, but it's actually old and stale. It's not the best idea.
Yeah, sometimes we have to ask them how certain they are about a particular idea. Of course, you never want to offend. We want to give other perspectives. I'm certainly not going to be right about everything, but having met with hundreds and hundreds, thousands, I guess, over the 30 years, different households, we can give a perspective for people. And, we'll see situations, for example, will someone go in and maybe talk to the clerk at the bank, and they're sold on this idea of a CD, for example. I can think of a particular couple who they moved from Las Vegas here. They went out to Indiana. They had started with us not long before, and they went out to Indiana and were setting up bank accounts at this little credit union, and the clerk there told them about a certificate of deposit that excited them. And they, instead of choosing to leave the mutual fund-based portfolio we had created for them, instead of just taking that money and putting their IRA into a certificate of deposit, they cashed out their IRA and bought the certificate of deposit. And so here they just thought it was so great to be able to get no risk in the market, which frankly they could have gotten while still maintaining the tax advantages of the IRA. And so sometimes we get excited about ideas and we don't think through all the implications of it. And in this case, I'm sure it was a well-intended clerk there at the credit union, the bank teller, whoever it was, but that person just didn't understand at all how IRAs work. And the sad thing was this couple had just retired, and because they were no longer actively earning income, they were no longer eligible to put money into a tax-advantaged retirement plan. And so they lost decades worth of tax advantages in a moment simply because they wanted to move money out of the market, which they could have done within their IRA. And so, yeah, it always pays to deal with the professionals who specialize in things, because there's often something, you open one door and there's two or three other doors that open. There's a ripple effect, and you just need to understand what you're doing before you make these big moves. I've seen many, many people hurt themselves because they got what sounded like great advice from their neighbor or their brother-in-law or who knows who. And those people giving that great advice don't have to live with the consequences that often can be painful. So we just say, come visit with us. We love it when our clients reach out to us and say, we've heard about this, or we're talking about that. One of the reasons I do all the client events that we do is it allows me to interact on a regular basis with our clientele. And so they're learning from one another, good and bad things, but it gives me the chance to interact with them. And so they can pull me off to the side and say, hey, psst, whisper something to me about what they're thinking about. And I can go to a client event and walk away with 10 or 20 different follow-ups with clients. And so through these regular interactions, and that's my key point here, it's not so much about the fun events that we do, even though we do a lot of fun events. It's really about that regular interaction. We are here as a sounding board for our clients. So when they get worked up about something, we can walk them back off the edge. We can give a different perspective. And if changes need to be made, well, absolutely, we can help them make those changes. But that's what they've hired us for, is to protect them. At the end of the day, it's really about protecting us from ourselves, because we don't know what we don't know. So for people who aren't working with us already, come in. We'll do a retirement readiness conversation with you, and we'd love to answer your questions. We'll share some models with you to help you understand. And for our existing clients, we always say just stay in touch, because we're absolutely here for you. They've effectively got us on retainer, and we want a long-term relationship where we're regularly interacting. That's what it's all about.
Investment advisory services offered through Golden Years Financial LLC, a registered investment advisory firm. Insurance is offered through Golden Years Insurance Services. These firms do not provide legal or tax advice. Consult your own legal and tax advisors before taking actions that may have tax implications. Investing in securities involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Insurance contracts principal protection is based on the claim-paying ability of the respective insurer. None of the information contained on this website shall constitute an offer to sell or solicit to buy a security or insurance product. The information and opinions contained on this site or requested from this site are provided by third parties believed to be reliable, but accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed. They are provided for informational purposes only and are not a solicitation to buy or sell any of the products mentioned. Any media logos and or trademarks contained herein are the property of their respective owners, and no endorsement by those owners of Mark Cordner, Golden Years Financial, or Golden Years Insurance is stated or implied.